And Stephanie, you've known Steve Bannon for a long time. I was out there on the campaign trail with you back in 2016. Steve Bannon, as we know, was a fixture back then, went into the White House, served as the chief strategist to Donald Trump in the White House, and was unceremoniously booted out of the White House, as you know, in August of 2017, but remained in the picture. So you know him well. Do you think he looks at this indictment as a badge of honor?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I want to start out by saying I'm very glad that this is happening. And I do hope that it will have, many others who are getting subpoenaed, like you said at the beginning, take a step back and realize there's some consequences here. However, my prediction is that the former president is going to tell everybody to continue to stall. They're going to fundraise off of this. Bannon himself, absolutely, I think, is going to wear this as a badge of honor and martyr himself almost. This is a very small example compared to what's going on. But I recall in the White House when we would get Hatch Act violations. That was a badge of honor. It was a joke in the White House. And, the president used to say to us, who's in charge of the Hatch Act? It's me. Go ahead, say whatever you want to say. I want to also say that I think this makes the 2022 elections more vital than ever, because I have a feeling, knowing them like I do, he's going to tell everyone to stall, and that if the House takes over with his rubber stamp candidates that he wants to get in, the special committee will then go away. That's kind of what I foresee happening. But that's not to take away from what the select committee has done. And I'm very, very glad that they've done that. And I'm glad the DOJ decided to do what they did with Bannon.
And Stephanie, let's remind people again what Steve Bannon said just one day before the January 6th insurrection. And let's talk about that.
All hell is going to break loose tomorrow. Just understand this. All hell is going to break loose tomorrow. It's not going to happen like you think it's going to happen. Okay, it's going to be quite extraordinarily different. And all I can say is strap in. The War Room, a posse. You have made this happen, and tomorrow it's game day. So strap in.
And we know there's been reporting that Trump and Bannon have been in touch with one another prior to the riot. They had been talking for weeks or months, as far as I know from doing my reporting at the time when I was at the White House. I was wondering, Stephanie, because you and I haven't talked about this, had you heard anything? Was it common knowledge inside the White House that Bannon and Trump were speaking again? And what did people think about that? I mean, obviously, I'm sure there were folks who thought, well, this can't be good.
Yeah, I mean, we often thought that. Now, I was in the East Wing at that point in time, but it was definitely known that Bannon was very much back in the picture. I think that when things started to look dire, Bannon, of course, swooped in and had these grand plans and grand schemes and promised that, all these patriots would fight for the president. And of course, that was something that Trump at the time would have loved to hear. Bannon was known for, when he was in the White House, having his big room with his whiteboard and all these plans. So the things that we're hearing now about the Willard Hotel and this war room, that doesn't surprise me at all either. Bannon was very, very good at telling the president what he wanted to hear. And I've got to say, listening to that what you just played, it made me sick to my stomach. And, let's not forget the president that day during his rally said, let's walk to the Capitol. I'll walk with you. And honestly, I bet he would have. I bet he would have if Secret Service probably told him no. He encouraged people to walk there. And then I think it's important for people to remember he sat in the dining room and did nothing and said nothing and enjoyed watching these people fight for him. And then just the other day, audio was released of him defending people who were running around the Capitol saying they wanted to hang Mike Pence, his vice president. This is really important, and this really is an attack on our democracy. It's the day I resigned. It made me sick then. It's making me sick now, and I just hope people will understand that how important this is, and look forward. Let's not look back. Let's look forward to how we can never let this kind of thing happen again. And again, I want to reiterate, I think 2022 is key to that, because they're going to try to stall until those votes happen.
Right, no question about it. But setting Steve Bannon aside for a moment, let's talk about the other big headline, and that is that former White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows is defying a subpoena. He failed to appear before the January 6th committee yesterday. Do you think Bannon's indictment will have some kind of chilling effect on Mark Meadows, or is it the same thing? Wears it as a badge of honor, is ready to martyr himself, so on and so forth. Could this have a chilling effect on people like Dan Scavino? What do you think?
It's funny. I've thought about this a lot. I would talking about Meadows. I would hope it would have a chilling. I would hope it would have a chilling effect on any of them. But that core group, as you said, Scavino too. No, they're going to wear it as a badge of honor. The president's going to say, "We're going to fundraise off this. Don't worry about, I'm sure, lawyers' fees. We're going to fundraise off this. Patriots are going to step up. This is going to make everybody excited for 2022, and then the select committee will go away." The president was very good at calming you down and telling you everything's going to be okay. You just got to fight, fight, fight. And Meadows especially, it's very clear that he wants to stay on Trump's good side. So I think that the people in the close circle and the people who actually need to be spoken to the most are going to wear this as a badge of honor. Again, that was the mentality in the White House when I was there. Anything we did like that was a badge of honor.
And Trump is battling to keep hundreds of pages of documents out of the hands of the January 6th committee. But you think that there are some off-the-book meetings, some in the residence of the White House that lawmakers may want to look into. I mean, Stephanie, you know that residence as well as most ex-officials of that administration. What goes on behind closed doors there?
Absolutely. Lots of meetings take place in the residence where, I'm hoping that they're looking at call logs, but I have a feeling even sometimes things weren't put into call logs. But a lot of meetings took place because the president at the time was so paranoid of leaks that a lot of our meetings took place in the residence. Number one, so he could keep track of who was in there. And if it leaked out, he would try to, figure that out. But number two, so that it was very much kept off the books, and documents, anything that was written down could probably be thrown in the trash where people can't, come and retrieve them to put into the archives. So that happened quite a bit. And I'm sure the select committee is aware of that and is looking into that. Mark Meadows was one towards the end who was definitely helping to plan those meetings. So I think that Mark Meadows should be spoken to. I think he will stall.
And, thinking back to what you were saying just a little bit earlier, Stephanie, about, what Trump was doing at the time, sitting and watching all of this unfold, the way he revved up that crowd, incited that crowd on January 6th, it makes me wonder, do you think Donald Trump should be indicted?
I think that the select committee needs to get all the facts out first. I don't want to, have a big blanket thought there. I think the select committee needs to do their job. I think that a lot of things will be uncovered that possibly, then he should. I think
Do you think he was responsible for what happened?
I think he was partly responsible for what happened. Absolutely. I think he absolutely knew what was going on. There is no way, again, knowing what I know behind the scenes and how the logistics work and how he wants to know how many people are going to be in the crowd. What is the stage going to look like? How are these people getting in? What's the message? There's no way that he and Mark Meadows weren't involved every step of the way and weren't talking to Bannon about, all hell breaking loose. And they had to know. And so if that's the case, and he said, go to the Capitol and let's fight, and he then sat and did nothing to even try to calm his supporters down, then yes, I think something needs to happen to him. I think that our country is divided right now, and I think that we can't let this kind of violence be okay. Just this week with the video that Gosar posted, it boggles my mind that Republican leadership hasn't denounced this kind of violence. It boggles my mind that the recording with Trump talking about or defending the people who were threatening Pence, no one is denouncing this violence. And that's part of what the problem is in our country right now.
Absolutely. And Chris Christie, he's a former Trump ally. You know him all too well. As well, he's been urging the Republican Party to move past 2020. He's basically urging the party to move past Donald Trump and the big lie. He's taken a few shots at Trump. He even talks about something that happened when he got COVID after being at the White House. And you probably saw this story in the New York Times. Chris Christie has a book coming out, and he writes that his priest arrived at the hospital and rubbed oils on his forehead in the sign of the cross, praying over him. And then Christie got a call from a hospitalized Mr. Trump, who had one main concern, according to Chris Christie, and it was, quote, "Are you going to say you got it from me?" Mr. Trump asked him. That's according to an account in the New York Times. Does that surprise you at all, Stephanie, that Trump would be thinking about himself in that situation? And as you remember, all of those people got sick at the White House, and here's Chris Christie. He's gravely ill, and Trump just wants to know, if he's going to get blamed.
Absolutely. And, again, the story just came out about the disastrous Tulsa rally. And, our own staff got sick. A bunch of staff got sick. One person was hospitalized. He was angry that that leaked. He was not worried about his own staff. I remember when I was quarantined and very sick as his press secretary, coming back and him yelling at me and asking me where the hell I had been. So it doesn't surprise me at all. It's always about Donald Trump and how it will look for him and how it will affect him. And I just hope that with people like myself or Chris Christie, and a lot of others, hopefully coming out soon, will just be able to talk about what the playbook is and what people can anticipate, and hopefully, as Chris Christie said, look forward, because again, 2022 is so important. I believe if the people he wants in get in, that will ensure he runs for president, because then he's got all of his rubber stamp people in there to do whatever he wants. So there's a really big picture we need to be thinking about, and I hope I can get that message out to as many people as possible.